Some breaking developments now coming in. We're now understanding Prime Minister Modi has had a talk with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. What really was on the agenda? We'll try and get more details, but that's the big update coming in. Abhishek continues to be with us. Abhishek, do we have any understanding of what was discussed?
So far, we have just got information that Prime Minister Modi had a telephonic conversation with the Russian President Vladimir Putin, and one can assume that during the talk, both leaders must have talked about the security issue, and like Prime Minister has always maintained that it's not an era of war. So probably a Ukraine issue must have also come up during the discussion, and how to bring in that differences close to a point and ensure that peace prevails in that region, because we have seen a lot of tragedy and destruction happening in Ukraine, thousands of casualties happening, and a lot of financial implications around the globe because of the Russia-Ukraine conflict has been witnessed in the last 7 months. So it looks like both the leaders had talked. Prime Minister has also, he has in the past also has said that dialogue and diplomacy could be the only way forward where both sides can find a truce or peace. And finding a solution militarily would be just a thing which is not possible. Prime Minister has been engaged with Ukrainian President Englsih also in the past. So we'll have to from here on, we'll see what was the key takeaways from this talk that Prime Minister had with the Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Right. So as Abhishek is rightly pointing out, this was a telephonic conversation between both the leaders. We're still awaiting the finer print and the details of what really was discussed. But in the backdrop of the tensions that still continue between Russia and Ukraine, as Abhishek was rightly pointing out, India has had its position very, very clear that this is the era of dialogue and diplomacy, even when the war was at its peak. And despite all the pressure that was coming in from the West for India to take a tough stance against Russia, India had a very neutral position, but also sending out a clear message that war is not the solution. In the backdrop of all of this, Abhishek, how crucial does this conversation become?
You see, India has always maintained a balanced stance. As far as this Russia-Ukraine conflict has been, India has not been part of Western and US-led NATO narrative that Russia is the perpetrator. At the same time, India has also maintained that peace could only be possible through a diplomatic process, through the process of dialogue, and humanitarian assistance is also something that India has always sent from its own part. There have been multiple reports of medicine and other humanitarian aid that India has sent to the people who have been affected by the war in Russia-Ukraine conflict, which has been going on for the last 10 months or so. So with this latest call, we can assume that when Vladimir Putin is not being engaged by other world leaders because of West and US and other NATO members trying to isolate him, India remains a point of communication where India has a good relation, a good tie with other part of the world also, and it has a good relationship with and traditional, historical and strategic ties with Russia also. So while India can convey to him the point of view of the world, India can also convey to the world what Russia thinks of this war. So India being at this position is very crucial to have any solution or have any dialogue or diplomacy going forward to ease the tension that is going on between Russia and Ukraine for a long time now.
Abhishek, just to, even as we await more details of what possibly was discussed between both the leaders, to give us some backdrop of when was the last time we saw both the leaders together? What were the big takeaways at last time?
They have been regularly in touch with each other. Last time when we saw Prime Minister Modi having a first-hand conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin was in Shanghai Cooperation Organization's meeting in Samarkand, in Uzbekistan, where that famous line of Prime Minister Modi that this is not an era of war was told by him to the President Putin. That has since then have reverberated across the world. Various political leaders and state leaders have mentioned that leader. In fact, G20 joint communique also had mention of this world that this is not an era of war and world has other priorities to discuss. And if Russia is willing to have come on this negotiating table, one can focus on the other issues that the world is currently facing: issues of climate change, issues of food and fertilizer shortage, issues of higher inflationary pressure across the globe, and the issue of oil prices. So these are the important issues that world needs to focus, and this has been Prime Minister's message to Russian President Vladimir Putin during his last conversation, physical conversation with Vladimir Putin in Samarkand.
Okay, Abhishek, I'll just request you to stay on with us. We also have former diplomat Ashok Sajjanar also now joining us on the broadcast. So good to have you with us here on CNN News 18. While we're still awaiting details of what was the fine print, what really was discussed, but how crucial do you think is this telephonic conversation?
I think it's very significant. It's very important. Two leaders. Number one, President Putin, who's engaged in this conflict with Ukraine and with the rest of the Western countries for the last 10 months or so. I think what he decides how to end this conflict or how to continue that conflict, I think that is very important. And of course, Prime Minister Modi, both in his individual capacity, in the sort of rapport that he enjoys with President Putin, in his capacity as presidency of G20, in his capacity as chair of SCO, in his capacity as India's chairmanship of the UNSC this month. So I think there are a large number of factors, that there is so much of heft and traction that Prime Minister Modi has at this moment to have a conversation with President Putin. So what I can foresee is that, of course, going forward, there have been so many commentaries in the press that the annual summit between the two leaders is not taking place. Some reasons have been ascribed, some speculations and conjectures have been given. So maybe this is also, an indication to give out a message to the world that as far as relations between the two leaders and between the two countries is concerned, they continue to be robust, they continue to be strong.
Right.
And the second also would be that in G20 presidency, we know that President Putin did not come to Bali.
Yeah.
And to get his full support for the Indian presidency, I'm sure that would also have been an issue that would have been discussed between the two leaders.
True. Sir, I'll just request you to stay on with us. We're getting